Welcome to the Lean Out Your Business podcast, a show dedicated to helping entrepreneurs accelerate business growth and simplify success. I'm your host, Crista Grasso, and I've been working with businesses for more than 2 decades to help them lean out and optimize what's working while eliminating anything that's not adding value. So if you are ready to get more time back in your day, more profit in your business, and to do business differently, growing and scaling on your terms, let's dive into today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. Today, I'm excited to share Michelle Glogovac with you. She actually helped me to launch this podcast, and she is brilliant at all things podcasts. So we are going to dive in and we are going to talk about podcasting as well as some great stuff about leaning out your business, because I think Michelle is such a great example of someone who runs a lean business. So Michelle, super happy that you're here. And before we dive into all of the great questions, let me share with everybody a little bit more about you. So Michelle is the podcast matchmaker, publicist, and host of the My Simplified Life podcast. After an 18-year career in corporate aviation, she discovered her passion in changing the world one voice at a time. So Michelle works with entrepreneurs, authors, and experts to niche down, grow their businesses and visibility, and ensure that their message reaches the masses. Michelle is a natural relationship maker, which is why her love of helping experts be interviewed on podcasts and featured in the media is so successful. She's a wife, mom of 2, stepmom of 2, and a fur mom. She has her BA and MS in law, and she resides in the Bay Area and loves to share what her favorite wines are. So Michelle, welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and talk to you. It's a treat.
I know. And so, thank you for helping me get this show launched. It was incredibly helpful. But I think that, one of the questions that I've gotten pretty consistently with my clients, and I'm getting a lot more now that I launched the podcast, is should somebody focus on starting their own podcast, or should they focus on trying to be interviewed on podcasts? And so I would love to hear your perspective on this.
I think it all boils down to time. How much time do you have? A podcast will take you about 4 hours to actually produce when all is said and done with editing and show notes and graphics and uploading and all of those wonderful things that you now know go into a podcast. So for a 30-minute episode, you need to count on about 4 hours plus your interview time if you're doing an interview to dedicate to one episode every week. If you're going to do interviews, then you just have to show up, which is a beautiful thing, but you also have to research the podcast that you want to be on. You have to make sure that you're reaching your ideal audience and clients and listeners, and that in itself takes time as well. So you can also farm out either of these tasks to make it work for you, which of course is right up your alley, to get lean. And so what I offer my clients is I do podcast pitching. So I do all of the research on the back end and I pitch my clients to be on podcasts to be interviewed. So I save them that amount of time because it does go, you can go down a rabbit hole of searching for podcasts and then you search for them and you should be listening to them before you pitch yourself or have someone pitch to them. And then you need to find out their contact information. And so there's just a lot that goes into that part as well, but it's less time than it takes to produce an actual podcast. They both have pros and cons. When you're having your own podcast, you're speaking to the people, you're in their ear. And that's a beautiful thing. It's an intimate thing that you wouldn't otherwise get if you didn't have your own show. And it also gives people an opportunity to get to know you before working with you. So you may have clients who are listening and go, oh my gosh, Crista is amazing. I don't need to vet her at all. I want to work with her. And it can be that simple. Whereas if you're guesting, then you're talking to someone else's audience, but it also gives you the opportunity to grow your own audience and find clients that way. So I think it all depends on time as to which avenue you'd want to go to, but both have benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done both, I worked with you last year also to get featured on podcasts. And I can't imagine honestly having taking the time to do that myself. It was much easier to have your support and your help with that. And I'm all about simplification and leaning things out and putting my time on my zone of genius work and letting other people do their zone of genius work, which this is absolutely yours.
Well, and when you work with someone who does it like myself, we've got a little black book that we can open up and, scroll through and go, oh, this is a good match here and there. And that's really what you're paying for, not just the pitches and the personalization, but you're paying for those relationships that are already existing.
Now, let's say though that for some folks, they're like, yep, makes sense, sure. But when I get started, I really want to just go out and I want to pitch podcasts and I kind of want to own the whole process myself. So if that's the angle that somebody wants to take, how would you recommend that they actually reach out and start to pitch those podcasts?
First, look at who their audience is and listen to the podcast. I recommend you are personal in your pitch. Don't make it a copy and paste, or as I saw on Twitter, a rinse and repeat. It should never be the same thing over and over again. And you want to showcase what you're going to bring value to that host. Why should they have you on? Because this is their platform. This is taking them hours and money out of their own pocket to put you out there. And so you want to showcase, this is what I'm going to bring to you. But at the same time, you're not making it all about you. So if you have a service you want to promote, you don't want to say, oh, I want to come on your podcast and I'm going to tell everybody about how great I am and how amazing my service is. No, you need to come with your expertise. What is it that you're going to teach them that nobody else can? And relate to them that, I'm a listener. I was listening to your interview with ABC the other day, and it really resonated with me because, and I recommend that's how you start your pitch. I do this with all of my pitches, whether I'm relating it to my client or I'm relating it to myself. And oftentimes, since I am the listener, I'll say, you know what, I heard this interview and this is why it hit me. Because I'm going through this in my life, or I experienced this as well. I had one pitch where I was stalking the woman's website and I read her bio and she had Irish twins. So her kids were 12 months apart. I have Irish twins. She loves wine. Her husband loves whiskey. I'm like, oh my gosh, she's my spirit person. And so that was my pitch that I told her, oh my goodness, we have so much in common. So I had to reach out. By the way, I wanted to pitch my client too, but I have landed so many clients on her podcast alone, including myself, all because of that pitch. So it's really just being personable and genuine, let them know that you are a listener. It's not just a blanket pitch, because even I get those and they get deleted. Quite frankly, they get deleted. And then you also want to make sure that you do the homework for the guest. So include your links. Oh, include those links, the websites, the social media. If you've been on a podcast before, include those links, because if you give a host homework, they're not going to have you on. I don't have time to go Google somebody to see if they're a good fit when they've said they're a good fit versus, oh, I can just click here and see what they're about in addition to the pitch email. So those would be the top two things to do. Do your research of who this person is and don't give them homework.
Can I tell you, within about an hour of launching my podcast, I got my first pitch of somebody who wanted to be on the show. It took no time at all. They were not a fit at all. There was nothing custom. There was no like, oh, I loved this new episode. Absolutely nothing. Just, hey, would you like to interview so-and-so on the show? And I was like, no, thanks.
Well, and that brings up a whole nother topic is they obviously didn't do the research because your first episodes are all solo.
Yep.
So there's no indication that you have guests on your show, which is like the biggest red flag there is. You don't make sure that they take guests. That's another big one.
Little tiny things, right?
Makes me cringe.
Kill people. So I want to dive into something that you're really also really good at that I know my audience would appreciate, because I'm always looking at helping people work smarter, not harder. And one of the things that I think you do really well that I'd love to have you share with them is how you repurpose your podcast content to make that one piece of content go really far and save people time ultimately.
Yeah. And this secret is something that can apply to other places, not just a podcast, but the big secret for a podcast is to create show notes. because from your show notes, you're going to create content for 16 other, did I just do show hands? For 16 other platforms. So it's really appearing to be everywhere and not having to do the work to be everywhere, because we're creating posts for everything, for your Instagram, your Twitter, your LinkedIn, and you don't need to be reinventing the wheel with new content. With every episode, you have enough content that, my goodness, it can last you a year. So you create show notes, and show notes, I like the blog style. So you have a summary of what the show's about. You have your 3 main topics. Then you have a summary of each of those topics. You have your links that have been mentioned. You notate some timestamps. So those are going to be between 15 and 60 seconds long, because those are the length of an Instagram story. And you'll identify quotes, and those should be less than 15 seconds long, because you're not going to turn them into an audiogram. And from your show notes, the show notes then become a blog post. So that's one way of repurposing it. You're going to focus on your SEO. What are people searching, when it comes to leaning out your business? Look at those keywords and make sure you include them in that. You're going to create a Twitter post, and you can do that straight from some of the hosts for your podcast. You're going to create your Instagram from it. And from your Instagram, you're going to have graphic templates. So it's really a plug and play. You don't want to reinvent the wheel every single week with new graphics. Make a template, because it's also then going to be recognizable to the people that are scrolling through. Oh, look, Krista's got another episode out. I know that because this is the graphic she uses, so you can see it. I've had people say, "Oh, I didn't know that so-and-so was on your show, but she posted it on her Instagram and I knew the graphic was yours." So it becomes something that people can see and can expect. Your graphics, you can have the square ones, will be great for Instagram. You can also use it on Facebook. Your rectangular sized ones you can have on your Instagram stories and your Pinterest. You can repurpose all of this onto LinkedIn. If you have a business type of podcast, you can put it, I mentioned Pinterest, and that's a big one that people overlook, especially business owners and entrepreneurs. Pinterest is becoming bigger and bigger, and it's not just for what am I cooking for dinner, or what should I redo my living room as. People are searching for business tips, marketing tips, all of these things. So I recommend definitely putting it on Pinterest every week. You can repurpose your show notes onto medium.com. And that's a simple copy and paste your web link to the show notes. So you really don't even have to do anything except for a few little motions that probably take you about an hour a week to put it on all of these different platforms, versus doing something new and for everything else. You can also, as we're recording this can be on YouTube, or it could be on your IGTV. You can have a whole series on that. You can then create guides within your Instagram. The list is really never ending.
I love it. And I will say, one of the things that we started doing too last year when I was a guest on a lot of podcast interviews is JC, who's kind of my right-hand person in my business, she would listen to the episode and she would pick one thing that I talked about in the interview, and she would take that and turn that into a blog post and do pull quotes. And of course, we'd repurpose the graphics and the things that the actual host would share. But we actually took the interview that I did on somebody else's podcast and turned it into its own many pieces of content as well, which
I noticed that
it's
beautiful. Yeah. There's so much that you can do with just one episode, one interview.
Mm-hmm. And you guys know, because I tell you all the time to work in focus blocks, this is a great thing to do in a focus block. Carve out a couple hours of time and just crank through all of this, and you'll get it done pretty quickly. And yeah, I mean, Michelle, all those ideas, I'm not even doing all of the things that you mentioned yet. I feel like there's a couple more I could add to my list. I love it.
Well, and I recommend choose what works for you. You don't have to do them all. I did a course where it was 16, and then it was like something else came out. Instagram came in with a new feature and there was 17, and then Clubhouse came out and there's like 18, but you don't have to be in all of these places. Just look at where your ideal listener is and do that. But at the same time, if there are places that are easy for you to just, copy and paste, then why not be there? Because then you can reach a bigger audience. So when people ask, how can I grow it? That's how you grow it. Put it out there. Don't just let it sit on Apple or Spotify or iHeart or Stitcher. Put it out there everywhere.
Yeah, I think for me, a good example of that is Twitter. I really don't use Twitter much for my business. I know a lot of people do, but every time I release a new episode, I tweet the episode, I take some of the pull quotes and put it out there. It really takes no time whatsoever to do, but it does just broaden the reach a little bit. So,
Absolutely. I'm on Twitter. I'm back at it. Like I took a break and then now I'm back and you just have to be there for PR. So
yep. It's got to kind of be your jam.
yes.
So I want to rewind back to your bio for a moment here because to me, your story and just your career progression itself is really fascinating. And I've always admired the way that you've grown your business and gotten really clear in what you do and who you serve. And just getting to kind of observe that journey along the way has been great. But you spent 18 years in corporate aviation.
Right.
Podcasting, not corporate aviation. So walk us through how you made that career switch and how somebody else can really think about that. Because I do have a lot of people that I work with, either who have left a long-term corporate career and have started a business, or who have successfully sold a business and are starting a brand new business. So let's talk about your journey there and what they can kind of take away from it if they're thinking about something along those lines too.
Yeah. So I was in aviation really kind of by chance because I needed a job in college and I could walk to the airport and didn't need a car. And I just stuck with it. And as I, got older, had kids, I knew that it wasn't what I really was passionate about doing. I was good at it because I'd spent 18 years at it, but it didn't mean that I was like, woohoo, I love what I'm doing. Jet fuel is so fantastic. It wasn't. And while I was in aviation, I was still trying to find something that I could do on my own. I sold some wine at a time. I did some social media. I'm like, okay, what is it? And then I was laid off in April of 2018. So I was forced to decide, what is it I want to do? Career wise, do I want to work for myself? And I knew that I wanted something different. I was done traveling the country, done with nannies. I just wanted to do something for myself that felt like it gave me purpose, because I felt like for 18 years, I saved the wealthy more money. That's what I did. And I was done with that. I wanted to actually make an impact in the world. And I tried some event planning because I'd done networking events before in my career. I did some social media management, but none of it allowed me the time that I wanted to spend with my family. And over the summer, it was September of 2018, a friend from my pregnancy class added me to a Facebook group of a life and business coach who was launching her podcast. And it was the first time I figured out that the purple button on my phone allowed me to listen to podcasts. So this is less than 3 years ago. It's kind of scary, right? And throughout her episodes, it was the same theme of, we all have a purpose, we all have a passion, you need to find it. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to find it. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to go about it, but I'm going to find it. And I would put that on my Instagram. And she approached me and said, do you want to pitch me to be on podcast? And I went, wait, that's a thing? Yeah. And so I started to pitch her. And as that grew, she then asked me to come and produce her show. And then I started producing other shows, and it all just kind of snowballed. And, when you get thrown into something, you learn all the different ways that you can do it, the ways that other people are doing it, what the best practices are. And then I was able to really go, okay, well, in alignment with what I wanted to do, and that was spend more time with my family. What is it that's allowing me to do this that also gives me a financial benefit and that I'm really enjoying? And it all came down to podcast pitching and PR, because when you do the podcast, that's 4 hours a week, as we've talked about, and sometimes you have last minute people who, oh, it's Monday night. Sorry, I forgot to get you this podcast episode to do at 5 a.m. And you're like, well, there goes my Monday night. That doesn't do it for me. And so I released that part and I said, I'm going to focus on my pitching, because it all comes down to relationships. And I'm creating these relationships with podcast hosts. I'm now creating them with journalists and different media people. And I'm growing those and landing clients to be featured in all of these different places. And all of my clients, I feel, have an important message that's going to change a life. It's going to change a business. Somehow it's going to affect someone in a positive way. And in that way, I get to change the world and do exactly what I wanted, which I find is my purpose.
Yeah, I love that. And I just, from the outside in, my perspective is you've grown and gotten a lot of success really pretty quickly, considering that this was new to you. And to me, I think it's because you keep things really lean. I consistently see you keeping things lean, working smarter, not harder. I feel like you're such a good example of how to really truly commit to something, experiment, but commit and grow a business. And so it's been fascinating to watch, and I very much enjoyed your journey. And I would love for you to kind of share with people, what is that for you? Like, how do you work smarter, not harder? And how do you keep things lean?
Well, when you have two kids, one who's a distance learner in kindergarten, you have to work smart. So, I am an early riser. I start my day at 5 a.m. and I know that from 5 to 7 is my working time. And I'm a morning person. So, I really focus on those 2 hours of what can I get done? And usually it's what do I not want to get done? Because that's what I need to get done. And I have, a schedule. My kids even have a schedule. They know they have a checklist, just like I have a checklist of this is what needs to get done. They're 4 and 5, but they've got little graphics and words. So if they can't read it, they can just see what they have to do. And we work within the time that we have. I've got alarms on my phone of when recess will start, when recess will end. And this is what I have to get done on these certain days. I've also blocked off my calendar. Over the summer, I started reducing the availability that I gave to people. You want a phone call Monday through Friday, 7 to 5, whatever you need. Oh, outside of that, sure, I can do a Saturday. No more. I started taking off Fridays and I block my calendar on Mondays. So I don't do calls. I don't do interviews on those days. Fridays, I try as hard as I can to actually take the full day off. And that is a day to do ballet and coloring. And that's what we do in this house. But it's really about having this schedule, prioritizing what you want to do, and then also creating processes for everything. My podcast, even when it was just myself, I have a process in place. I have a checklist. Everything's in Trello. Know that I need to get this done, this done, this done. When it comes to repurposing the podcast content, then all of the checklists get done and cards get moved. When it comes to the PR side, I do the same thing. All of my clients have their own Trello board. I go through at the beginning of the month, who am I pitching to? What do I need to follow up on? So it's really just having the process and the procedures written out. I've brought on some people at times to write show notes, to help me a little bit with some research. And I already have those processes written down step by step so that I can bring anyone off the street. And there you go. This is what needs to get done. And there's links included and embedded and everywhere. So it makes it really easy. And hopefully as I scale and continue to grow and I'll bring on more people, that's going to be what really beneficial to be able to just hand it off. And I did have a show note writer say, you didn't even need to have a Zoom call because all you needed to give me was that Google Doc and it was clear as day. It's done.
Yeah, I love it. So guys, listen really closely. Systematize what you do and document your processes. That is how you work smarter, not harder, and set boundaries and create protected space. Michelle, I love
it. Sounds so much nicer the way you put it.
Well, before we're about to wrap up here, and I want you to tell people how they can learn more about you, but there's one last thing I want to just touch on really quickly, because I love your definition of balance, and I frequently quote you. So I talk a lot about balance, and to me, it's trying to find what are those things that are important to you other than your business and making sure you're creating the protected space for it. But I like the way that you define balance in the presence piece of it. So can you kind of share with everybody how you talk about balance?
Yeah, balance to me is being fully present in the moment that you're in. So whether that is working, then you're fully present working. You are committed to doing the task at hand. If you're playing with your kids, then you are fully committed to playing with your kids. You're not on your phone and playing with the kids and, doing makeup and playing with the dog all at the same time. It's allowing yourself to be mentally and physically in the spot that you're supposed to be in. And I believe that that can change throughout the day many times. I think that I posted last week or so that, in the morning I did some emails, and then from there we went on a family walk. And then from there I did something on the podcast, and it continued to ebb and flow and change, but I was fully present in every moment that I was in. So to me, that's balance. Because I'm allowing myself to be in the moment that I need to be in.
Yeah, I love that definition. And I think that's so important because so often it becomes so easy to constantly be thinking of the other thing when you're in the moment. Like you're working and you're thinking about the stuff that you've got to do after. You're doing the stuff after and you're thinking about the stuff you've got to be doing when you're working. And so I really like that perspective. And I think that does also support the working smarter, not harder.
Yeah. And it takes practice. It's not something that you just, I come from the corporate world. So no, work-life balance was like, oh, you turned off at 5 and that's it. And it's taken a while to realize that that's really not what balance means.
Nope, it sure isn't. So tell everybody where they can find more about you and what you have going on.
Yes. So my website's themslcollective.com. You can find me on Instagram at Michelle Glogovac. And you can also listen to me every Tuesday on My Simplified Life. It's everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Amazon Music, the newest thing. Yeah. And right now, what I have going on is just client work, client work, client work.
Excellent. Well, Michelle, thank you so much. I loved everything that you shared today. Thank you for being here. I'm sure everybody will love this episode, and we'll have you back at some point in the future to dive in and talk more about all things lean.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on, Crista.
Thanks, everyone. We will see you again next week. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Lean Out Your Business podcast. I hope you got a lot of value and actionable insights from today's show, and would love if you take a moment to leave us a review. If you have any questions on today's episode or on how to lean out your business, join us over in our private Facebook community, where every week we do live training and Q&A, and I'd love to have you be part of the conversation. Head to leanoutmethod.com/group to join us. And before you go, be sure to subscribe to the show so you're the first to know when we release a new episode. We'll see you next week.